Hey guys, it's Halcoon. So, a while ago I made a fun video for this cute little indie game named Minecraft, and it was... Wait, how long ago did I make this? Oh my god! Anyway, a while ago, I made a fun video for this cute little indie game named Minecraft. For those who don't know, I put together the skeleton of the Enterprise D and popped it into the game. It was quite well received, and I was interviewed for magazines and put into a documentary, and it was a fun time. In the years since, the project has spun off into Minetrek, which still exists. Here's the completed ship, and here it is hanging out with its many friends. This community has grown independent of me and is actually ran by M. Heller 3000, who, by the way, speaks with a lot more hearts than you would think. I'm really happy that someone was able to take the reins, and I'm quite proud of what they've created. Every few years or so, I'll pop into the Discord and say hello. Mostly everyone freaks out that I'm still alive, and I wave and smile, and then I get crippling anxiety and disappear for a year or two. The reactions are fun, but I don't often stay long. I'm grossly agoraphobic, and I'm not really a community kind of guy. So in the end, I politely decline any server requests and invites and disappear, going back to my little quiet corner of the internet. To give a little history, this whole Enterprise concept thing was conceived way back when Google Earth was a PC application. Someone took some Enterprise D blueprints from the internet and layered them together out in the ocean. It looked like a pretty cool ghost ship, and I decided to grab the plans myself and make a copy. Then, taking these slices, I was able to import them into the game, and I guess history was made. But if you like that little project, I've been working on something new, and I think you might get a kick out of it too. Let me start with a sea story. When I was younger, from time to time, I found myself living on this. This is, or rather was, the USS Independence, designation CV-62. It was a forward-deployed Forrestal-class supercarrier based out of Yokosuka, Japan. The Indy shared her class, and therefore her blueprints, with 3 other carriers: the Ranger, the Saratoga, and the Forrestal. Put a pin in that, because it's going to become important later on in the story. In 1998, the Independence was decommissioned. Between the time of being struck in 2004 and its final cruise to the shipbreakers in 2017, she sat in a graveyard waiting to be turned into razor blades. While browsing the internet, I found a few pictures of her and felt really sad. This once breathing and living ship was left to die, and the only thing I had was memories. Except... in 2007, the Naval Sea Systems Command released into the public domain the original ship's drawings for the USS Saratoga from 1953. I mean, it should be in the public domain, after all we did pay for the thing. This included 18 plates showing every deck from the double bottom, ship holds, engine rooms, living spaces, hangar bay, roof, flight deck, bridges, and everything in between. As the Saratoga is a copy of the Independence by way of the Forrestal, I immediately recognized every place I'd ever been. Where I slept, where I worked, where I ate, and where I hung out just to get away from everything. So, like a young rebel fighting against the Empire, I grabbed the plans. Unfortunately, these plans are in bad shape, and I made a decision. I'm going to redraft the entire ship. Actually, I already started and completed the whole bottom deck. Unfortunately, after completing this, I discovered that even though it looks really nice, I made some fairly horrific architectural errors and screwed up so badly, I have to redraft this again. However, what I learned in making this rough draft, I can take forward and make an even better version that can possibly surpass the source files themselves. So without further ado, let's get to drafting. To start our redrafting adventure, the first thing we need to do is inventory what we have. The most important document that I downloaded out of the whole bunch is this. This is the document from the Naval Sea Systems Command that shows that the current plans have been properly redacted and for public release. This means, in legal terms, that what I have has been declassified and has also been placed into the public domain. If you notice, there's a typo or two. The Saratoga is CV-60, not CV-6. CV-6 was a World War II attack carrier named, ironically, Enterprise that was scrapped in 1958. However, the plates do match the documents given, so I'm pretty sure that's just missing a 0. So on to the plates. I have the cover sheet, once again showing a date of issue of 2007, and saying that it has been placed into the public domain. Then I have half of a data sheet. I'm assuming the bottom half has been redacted, however it does give me some great starting points for measurements. This is going to be key when we start to figure out scaling. Next, there's the starboard outboard profile, and then the same thing for the port side. Then we have the inboard profile, which is basically a centerline cutaway as viewed from the starboard side. And then we have the deck plans, and here they are from top to bottom. These are the island decks, which is the superstructure on the flight deck where the bridges and whatnot are located. Then we have the flight deck, O3 gallery deck, O2, O1, and main deck. As a note, the first or main deck is the hangar bay. The flight deck is actually built upon the main deck and is commonly called the roof. Then we have the second deck, third deck, fourth deck, first platform and second platform, called as such because they don't connect in the middle to make way for the massive machinery rooms that drive the shafts. Here, 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 and here. Then we have the hold and the double bottom. The double bottom serves as a framework for the entire ship. I also have in my possession a copy of some well-worn and rather gnarly damaged control maps as well. These came from the Historical Naval Ships Association. I'll be using these to help with mapping compartments and verifying measurements. All in all, it's a pretty cool haul. Now that we have our inventory sorted, let's prep a new document for redrafting and get an overall feel for the condition of the plans. From what I can gather, judging by the scale, and we'll get back to that later, the original drawings were drafted on sheets that were 72 by 22 inches. I'm a little fuzzy on the width of the drafting as the vertical borders vary greatly in size, and also the area around the borders have been redacted in one way or another. I settled on 22 inches as that's the size that fits the largest drawing and still matches a common plotter paper width. 18 inches is too small, and 24 inches was a little excessive, though I did like the idea of a nice round 6 foot by 2 foot document. With that as a baseline, I'll start with my first document. I'm going to be drafting the ship using Inkspace. I chose this because it's free and does everything that I need it to do. Now there is a question of why I'm not using an application designed for engineering, for example, AutoCAD. Well, first and foremost, AutoCAD is $1,800 a year, and I refuse to rent software. That means Adobe products are also out, so no Illustrator either. In the end, I'm not really re-engineering the ship, I'm redrafting the plans that already exist, and Inkspace is what I know. So let's talk about units of measurement for a bit, as those who use metric are in for a wild ride. Throughout this project, I'm going to be using Imperial measurements. The reason why is because the ship was designed using feet and inches, and was drafted using feet and inches, and was ultimately built using feet and inches. As I go through the ship, it's going to become increasingly impossible to match Imperial with metric units, especially when working back and forth between scales. For those who use sane units of measurement, the only olive branch I can offer is this. An inch is close to 2.5 centimeters, a foot is a little under 30 centimeters, a meter is a little bigger than 3 feet, and a frame, which I'll get to later, is 122 centimeters apart. That's the best I can do. With that sidebar over, let's take a look at the scans. These blueprints were originally drafted at a scale of 1/16 of an inch equaling 1 foot. This comes out to a scale of 1 to 192. If we look at the data sheet, we're told that the frame spacing is 4 feet. If we fire up GIMP and look at the double bottom, we can count the pixels between frames and we come up with 18 pixels. Since we know that 1/16 of an inch is a foot and the frames are spaced 4 feet apart, that makes the space between the frames 1/4 of an inch. Since we know that 1/4 of an inch is 18 pixels, we can multiply that by 4 and get 72 pixels, or in other words, 72 dots per inch. That resolution is abysmal, and it shows. If we look at the very forward of the double bottom, you can't tell that this says Peak Tank 8 Tech 0 Tech 0 Tech William. This is where the damage control drawings really come in handy. In order to do any good archiving, these scans need to be at least 300 dpi minimum. That's what's so great about SVG, and why I'm using this format. It can be scaled to any resolution. The good news is that this confirms the drafting is at least 72 inches long, so now we need to set up the document for the proper scale. In my document, I'm going to be setting up some properties. The first is to match the document size to 72 by 22 inches. Then I'm going to define a few grids. My first grid is the overall scale. I'm going to define the first grid with the origin through the center at 11 inches. This will match the center line of the ship. Then I'll do the spacings at 1/16 of an inch. Then I'll set the major grid by 4, and this will put every major grid line on a frame. Now I'm going to set up a separate grid for the y-axis. This is where I screwed up my rough draft. When I originally put the scan up against my grid, I noticed the frames on the y-axis were off. It was no bother to me, as I knew the scan was warped, so I assumed that it was not scaled properly. So I also made these 4 feet apart as well. However, I didn't know this was right until I finished the entire double bottom. Since this is such a critical error, I have to redo this deck all over again. The core issue is that these aren't frames. These are intercostals, and they're not set at 4 feet. But the datasheet doesn't tell me what they're set at. The datasheet does give me the total width of the boat, but that's at the flight deck and has all kinds of goobers hanging off the side of it. For example, these life rafts. So that doesn't really help me. Looking online, I do have a saving grace. According to Wikipedia, the beam, or the width at the waterline, is 130 feet. Looking at our cutaway, we can see that the waterline comes up to the fourth deck, and even better, on the fourth deck, the sides are parallel. Since 130 divided by 2 is 65, looking at the scale, I can confirm that there is exactly 65 feet from the center line to the hull. No need to scale the width. To get the longitudinal spacing, our friend the damage control drawings become useful again. These drawings are also to scale, but also isometric. This means I can measure the perpendicular distance by changing the angle. I'll demonstrate. In GIMP, we can use the scale here. As you can see, it's helpfully marked every 4 feet. We can take this scale and measure an arbitrary space, let's say 8 tac 97 tac 2 tac whiskey. I can get the length, which is 20 feet. What I can also do is take the scale and rotate it by its isometric angle of 60 degrees, and now I can see the width is also 20 feet. If we take a look back at the deck plans for the double bottom, you can see that 8 tac 97 tac 2 tac whiskey is here. We'll learn a little bit later how I was able to read this, but you're going to have to trust me on this one. If we count, we'll find 6 intercostals that span 20 feet. If we take that 20 feet, divide by 6, we find that it is equal to 3 1/3 feet. 1/3 of a foot is 4 inches, which means the average length between the intercostals is 3 feet 4 inches. Now we can set up that distance in our second graph as the y-axis, and then every 4-foot frame on the x-axis. Now that we have our scale set up, let's talk more about how double bottoms are constructed and more about frames and intercostals. This picture shows a typical double bottom construction. A double bottom is just that. They're 2 plate layers with a frame structure inside. The Saratoga uses both types depicted here. The big takeaway is that there's a structural frame every 4 feet going from forward to aft, and the intercostals are perpendicular to that. These are the support structures that support the bulkheads above, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a space or compartment that does not stop on a frame or an intercostal. Also, there's a few locations, mostly back aft, where we have longitudinals as support. It's also a thing to note that frames and intercostals often have manholes, lightning holes, drain holes, and air holes to help lighten the frame and to allow anything in the tank to flow to all corners of the space. Finally, before I restart drafting, I still have a few final decisions I have to make before remaking the double bottom. For those who have gone this far with me, from time to time, I'll be streaming my drafting on Twitch, so come along and check it out. I'll also be on the lookout for an upcoming Patreon as well. I'll be making the rough draft of my double bottom available for download, so you can ask any questions you might have. Anyways, thanks for watching.